It is the melancholy law of human societies to be compelled sometimes to choose a great evil in order to ward off a greater evil, a greater evil. Every day someone jumps up and shouts and says, "Tell us what is happening in Vietnam and why are we in Vietnam and how did you get us into Vietnam?" Well, I didn't get you into Vietnam. You've been in Vietnam 10 years.
The President would like to talk to Mr. J. Edgar Hoover. Thank you.
Hello, Edgar. Yes, I don't hear you well. What's the matter? You got this phone tapped? No. I'm wondering if our wires are tapped at all. Every time I say something in the State Department, I read about it. And I just, it's getting me frightened to even talk, take a call.
A greater evil.
Lyndon Baines Johnson. Born in 1908, he grew up in a comfortable middle-class home in Johnson City. At an early age, Lyndon showed a keen interest in politics. From the beginning, he was driven by a determination to win, whatever the cost.
In a word, he was ruthless. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do to get what he wanted, regardless of what it was. And probably the best example would be in 1948 when he was running for the Senate. And he was running against a man named Coke Stevenson. And the election was very, very close.
The race was so close there was no way to call it. The lead seesawed back and forth.
I said, "I think you're going to win it." He said, "No, I think we've lost it." And I said, "No, it's going to be the reversal of 1941.
3 days after the polls closed, the votes were still coming in, and Stevenson led by a handful. It looked as if Stevenson would be the new senator from Texas. But Johnson remembered 1941. He was not about to lose again. The election now hinged on the Duke of Duval County, George Parr, the man who controlled the votes in South Texas.
George Parr controlled that county, and those people voted the way he wanted them to vote. No question about that. None whatever. Now, the candidates had nothing to do with it.
In the nature of things, you don't write down, bought these votes, yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock. But obviously there was some understanding between the Johnson people and the political bosses in South Texas.
In the tiny South Texas town of Alice, 6 days after the polls had closed, 202 additional votes were reported from Precinct Box 13. When they were counted, all but 2 were for Lyndon Johnson. When the signatures of the 202 new voters were examined, some say the names were all written in the same ink and listed in alphabetical order.
It did look to me like there had been a change in ink, and it looked like 200 or 202 or 3 names had been added to the poll list in a different ink by a different hand. Mr. Stevenson was an outraged man that felt like the election had been stolen from him, and he felt like what he'd just seen was evidence of that.
Stevenson challenged the election at the Texas State Democratic Convention. It was no use. The Johnson forces were too powerful. When it was all over, Precinct Box number 13 made the difference. Johnson won by 87 votes. But the question of a stolen election remained. 19 years later, Ronnie Duggar met in the White House with President Lyndon Johnson and asked him about the election of 1948.
One night up in his bedroom, he started laughing and he seemed to wonder if he could find something, and he said he was going back into Bird's bedroom, which was next door. And he rummaged around in a closet. I think I could hear him rummaging around in the closet, and he came in with this photograph of these 5 guys in front of this old car with Box 13 balanced on the hood of it. I looked at him and grinned, and he grinned back. But he wouldn't explain it to me. I asked him, well, who were these guys? Why did they have Box 13 on the hood of this car? What did it mean? And he just, nothing. wouldn't say.
And that stuck with him the rest of his life.
That rigged ballot became the template for a political career based on bribery and corruption. The full extent of Johnson's criminal activity only began to unravel 11 years after his death. In 1984, at this courthouse in Franklin, Texas, a former Johnson business associate, Billy Celestes, appeared before a grand jury.
According to Billy Celestes, there were 8 murders perpetrated on the part of Lyndon Johnson. The first name was a man named Douglas Kinzer. That was followed by a number of men involved in Estes businesses who were corrupt, and they were all killed with carbon monoxide. Josepha Johnson's name is listed on this Justice Department document. That's Lyndon Johnson's sister. So Estes is accusing the Vice President of the United States of murdering his own sister. And the 8th name listed is the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. And then there is a promise of knowing more. And if Billy Celestes is telling the truth, and there is every reason to believe he is, it gives you an idea of the depth of the corruption and the ruthlessness of Lyndon Johnson.
According to Estes' written testimony, that murderous cycle began in 1951 in Austin, Texas, at this downtown golf course known as Butler's Pitch and Putt. The killer was a Johnson henchman called Malcolm Wallace.
Malcolm Wallace was born and raised in Texas. He was Texas-bred, Texas-educated, a very intelligent man. And when he graduated from the University of Texas, he was evidently recruited by Lyndon Johnson, and he was given a job at the Federal Department of Agriculture.
John Douglas Kinzer, the golf pro at Butler's Pitch and Putt, was having an affair with Wallace's wife and with Lyndon Johnson's sister.
Lyndon Johnson's sister, Josepha, was an alcoholic. She was a drug user. She was sexually promiscuous. She had loose lips. And who knows what she might tell Kinzer or others about Lyndon Johnson's political shenanigans.
Malcolm Wallace walked into the Pitch and Putt golf course in Austin, Texas, and shot to death in cold blood John Douglas Kinzer.
Kinzer died here for his indiscretions. Wallace was soon arrested and went on trial in Austin 3 months later.
First-degree murder, open and shut case. He gets a lawyer, known as a Lyndon Johnson lawyer. So Lyndon Johnson is going to do his best to get his friend out of hot water.
During that trial, Lyndon Johnson took a room at a local hotel, and the 10 days that that trial was going, constantly sent runners from the hotel to the courthouse to bring him word of what was going on during the trial. So he followed the pulse of the trial very, very carefully.
Lyndon B. Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover had boxed them into a hole. They were absolutely boxed in.
And so history was made. Lyndon Johnson ran on the Democratic ticket and eventually became the 36th President of the United States. The Kennedys may have kept their secret, but more than 30 years later, the one surviving eyewitness has broken her silence.
Robert Kennedy said, "We both promised each other that we'd never tell what happened that day."
But I am telling what happened.
1 week after the death of JFK, Lyndon Johnson placed a call to J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI. The Kennedys had kept Hoover at arm's length. Dangerous as a rattlesnake, he'd once been called. But that wasn't Johnson's style. He wanted to keep Hoover inside the tent, as this curious little exchange illustrates.
You're more than the head of the Federal Bureau as far as I'm concerned. You're my brother and personal friend, and you have been for 25, 30 years. I got more confidence in your judgment than anybody in town. And I certainly appreciate your confidence. Well, thank you. Thank you.
We are especially fortunate to have Mr. Hoover's strong personal dedication to maintaining the high standards of protection for civil liberties of the individual under our system of law.
The answer is vigorous law enforcement.
That's the only answer.
That's the only answer.
How about justice? You hear a lot about justice with law enforcement.
Justice is merely incidental to law and order. Law and order is what covers the whole picture.
Growing up, Stephen never knew the identity of his father, but Brown says she tried to get Johnson to acknowledge Stephen during their last meeting in 1969.
And he said it'd been too many years, too many heartaches, and it would hurt Lady Bird and the girls.
Brown eventually told her son who his father was. And in 1987, Stephen Brown filed a $10.5 million lawsuit against Lady Bird Johnson, claiming that he had been deprived of his birthright. Before the suit could be tried, Stephen Brown died of lymphatic cancer.
Stephen didn't know during most of his life, however, that LBJ was his alleged dad, did he?
No.
Why didn't you tell your son?
I was told. I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, I didn't repeat anything, and it would have been political suicide for Lyndon to have acknowledged us at that time.
Hey, why don't you just read the letter that Jerome Ragsdale, attorney and counselor law, who was he, first of all?
He was the attorney. I don't have my glasses.
Oh, you don't have your glasses?
Anyway, he was Lyndon's attorney, and he was the liaison between Jess Kellum and
Dear
Lyndon.
Madeline, thank you so much for breaking your plans and meeting with Jess and me. Who's Jess?
That was his hatchet man,
His hatchet
Jess
man.
Kellum.
Okay, Jess and me in Houston last week. I sincerely hope, it's dated incidentally May 18th, 1973. When did LBJ pass away?
He died in January of '73.
So this is several months after he passed away. Okay, I sincerely hope we did not inconvenience you in any way. Those of us who are close to Lyndon are saddened by his recent death. It is fortunate that he died at the ranch. He would have wanted it that way. It is unfortunate, however, that he died so bitter and tormented. As we discussed in Houston, you have my personal assurance that I will continue with the financial arrangements that Lyndon provided for you and Steve throughout the past. I know you are very concerned about this, and I simply wanted to relieve your mind. As always, if you need additional funds for you and Steve's living expenses, please do not hesitate to call me. Of course, I will continue to make weekly home visits to verify you and Steve's welfare. Sincerely yours, Jerome T. Ragsdale, attorney and counselor at law based in Dallas, Texas. What were the financial arrangements, man? How much was it?
My home was paid for, and I had a maid, and I had credit cards, and I had whatever my needs were.
Did you, Madeline, have any encounters with LBJ either immediately before or immediately following the assassination of
Yes,
John
the
Kennedy?
morning of the assassination, he was angry, but he was always angry when Ralph Yarborough and John Connally, there was a political feud going on.
Senator
in
Yarborough
Dallas.
of Texas, Governor John Connally of Texas at the time.
He and I had planned a meeting that night in Austin. We were going to the big fundraiser. And he said, well, after today, the blank Kennedys would never embarrass him again. That was no threat. That was a promise. And I kind of laughed it off. I said, oh, after the rendezvous, everything's going to be great. Well, Jess Kellum had called me also, and he was telling me
Hatchet man?
Yeah, the hatchet man. And I said, oh, Jess, he'll be okay. He's just mad. You know, everything's going to be all right.
Why was he so mad at JFK?
The Kennedys were always putting him down and calling him the country bumpkin, and he just didn't like it. They were a stumbling block in his way politically.
When he said that to you, did you take it seriously?
Not at that second. I just thought he was mad.
Did you talk to him at all after the tragedy, after
Oh,
the
yes.
horrible
I
crime?
met him. I met him in Austin on New Year's Eve. And I was real concerned about it because everyone in Dallas was talking about he was responsible for the assassination. So I said to him, Lyndon, I said, you had already told me that after that day, the Kennedys wouldn't embarrass you again. And then Jack Ruby had come out openly and said that Lyndon Johnson was the cause of it. So I said, I've got to be, in my mind, I've got to put things to rest. And he had a temper fit. He blew up and just screamed and hollered, and then he calmed down, and he turned around, and he said at that time it was the oil people I knew and the CIA.
Wait, are you saying that Lyndon Johnson, was he now President of the United States?
Yes.
Said to you personally?
Yes.
You swear this?
Swear.
That the oil people and the CIA were involved in the murder of John Kennedy?
Yes.
LBJ said that to you?
Yes.
Was it just the two of you alone?
Yes.
You sure it's not That the passage of years have made your memory foggy?
No.
You're not embellishing this tale, man?
No.
You sit here today and you claim that LBJ said the oil people and the CIA...
Scouts honor.
...killed the president.
Right.